So a British man has been arrested for posting a meme on Facebook that apparently caused some people anxiety, which apparently is a crime in the UK. And it's absolutely terrifying because this is something I can definitely see happening here at some point. And I mean, the video of this is so unbelievable. Have you seen this one? Have you seen this one floating around Twitter? So Darren Brady, he's a 51-year-old veteran in the UK. And he was hauled out of his house in handcuffs for reposting a Facebook image that he didn't even make. It was made by somebody completely different. He reposted this Facebook image. It was a swastika made out of pride flags. And it was meant to call attention to the free speech killing fascist LGBTQ agenda, where basically they've decided that they're the only ones that get to speak and they're the only ones that get to have any discussion of topics, and the rest of us have to shut up and play ball. And so he shared this Facebook meme, and it got him arrested because, according to British authorities, the meme caused some viewers anxiety, and therefore it constitutes a hate crime. Seriously. So this whole entire thing, it ended up being caught on cell phone video. Get this. I'm going to let you watch the video, then we're going to talk about it. Here you go.
No. The Hampshire police would realise how ridiculous this is.
It is ridiculous.
It is. Good. I'm
happy to come to this.
What did it need to come to?
Tell us why you escalated it to this level. Because I don't understand. I posted something that he posted. You come to arrest me. You don't arrest him. Why has it come to this? Why am I in cuffs? Because there's something he shared, then I shared.
Because someone has been caused, obviously, anxiety based upon your social media page. That's
not his.
Why you've been arrested.
Someone has been caused anxiety based on your social media post. That is why you have been arrested. That is actually what this cop told this dude, standing out front of his house with him standing in handcuffs. Somebody was caused anxiety. Somebody's itty-bitty baby feelings got hurt. Somebody had a moment. Somebody had to go grab a Kleenex. Somebody had to walk around their living room wringing their hands because they were so incredibly upset by this Facebook meme that caused absolutely no harm to anybody, that didn't attack them, that didn't do anything to them other than offend their delicate sensibilities. Somebody was caused anxiety by seeing something that you posted on the internet, and that's why you're standing outside of your house in handcuffs and we're slapping you with a hate crime charge. Really, really. That is actually what happened to this guy. Brady was arrested. He was charged with malicious communications, which is apparently an actual charge in the UK. Stems from a 1988 law that was passed by Parliament that makes it a crime to send or deliver letters or other articles for the purpose of causing distress or anxiety. Apparently, this also applies to like email communications and other things like that. The way that I read that, you don't get to harass somebody via email or the postal system. That's how I read that. You don't get to intentionally harangue somebody in order to cause them distress, in order to scare them. It's an anti-harassment law, right? Which kind of sort of makes sense. You can't stress somebody out. You can't send threatening anonymous letters or things of that nature. That makes a little bit of sense to me. I understand that. But the cops used that to extrapolate that this guy had caused, had sent malicious communications because he posted to his own personal Facebook page a meme that some people found offensive. His friend, Harry Miller, who's a former police officer, he was also arrested. He was charged with obstructing a peace officer because he tried to get in the way of the officers arresting his friend. Brady was then reportedly told, get this is the real kicker. This just tells you everything you need to know about this bogus charge and why they did what they did. Brady was reportedly then told that he could pay £80 in order to take an educational course on inclusivity and anti-discrimination, in order to downgrade his charge from a criminal one to a non-criminal one. If that is not extortion, I don't know what is. We're going to arrest you in front of your own home, and we're going to slap cuffs on you because you posted something that somebody else didn't like. Oh, and by the way, if you cough up £80, you can take this educational course that teaches you how to not be mean to people, and we'll kind of downgrade it to a civil penalty, won't be a criminal charge. I kind of want to know how often British authorities get away with this. where essentially you're arresting somebody for a bogus charge. You know that it's a bogus charge. You know that you look ridiculous. Maybe they don't get filmed doing this quite as often. Maybe that's part of the problem. But you know that this is complete and total bullcrap. But you're doing it so that this guy ends up paying a whole bunch of money to the government so that he can sit there and be brainwashed and sat in front of a propaganda film that teaches him how to not be, non-inclusive and how to not be discriminatory against essentially the left. And this is so freaking brazen. And the reason that I say that it terrifies me that I can see this happening in the United States of America is because of what is already going on to absolutely kill free speech in this country, particularly with social media. And we talk about it a lot at MRC, but it seems like every single time the left goes one step further, you turn around 2 seconds later and they've taken another step. And the war against free speech continues. So Twitter apparently now has a problem with calling people who teach little kids about graphic sexual content groomers. You can't use that word anymore to describe people that intentionally indoctrinate small prepubescent children with graphic, pornographic imagery or discussions, or who talk to children about sex and sexual topics behind their parents' back with the express intent of keeping it from that child's family. You can't call them groomers anymore because we're not going to talk about how the actual content is offensive. We're not going to talk about how the books that are being put in public schools are offensive or the graphic imagery that's being shown to kindergartners is explicit and offensive. We're not going to talk about how this entire agenda of a whole bunch of people who think that they know better than a child's own parents and who are attempting to divide that child from their families and wedge themselves in so that they can now be that child's confidant. We can't talk about how that's offensive, but don't call them groomers because that's a bridge too far. So this week, Twitter censored the podcast host Tim Pool for calling an image of adults showing sexual content to children grooming. Twitter then suspended the account of Gays Against Groomers, which says that it's a coalition of gays against the sexualization and indoctrination of children. So think about that. They're supposed to be like an entirely protected class, right? I mean, we're talking about gay people. But apparently, if they have a problem, even within their own community, against, teaching small children about sexualized topics that kids are not ready for and shouldn't be talking about, even gay people have a problem with this, and they can now be censored because apparently, I guess they're not leftist enough or they just get thrown under the bus with everybody else because they don't kowtow towards this radical agenda. Vimeo took down Libs of TikTok's new account just a day after it was launched. Twitter actually told the Daily Dot that it bans calling LGBTQ people groomers. You can't call them groomers. You can't say that this is grooming. So we're going to talk about what exactly it is that people like me say is grooming and why I'm going to keep calling them groomers. And quite frankly, that's being kind because what I should actually call them is pedophiles. We're now going past grooming here. I'm going to show you some examples of how this is going on in public schools, in public libraries. This isn't just grooming anymore. This is straight up, flat out exposing children to porn. Oftentimes at your taxpayer dollars, and we're not, and we can't even call them groomers anymore. I find this interesting. So here are some of the most common tactics employed by groomers. See if any of these sound familiar to you. Victim selection. Abusers often observe possible victims and select them based on ease of access to them or their perceived vulnerability. I'm not really sure that you can get more victim selective than targeting small preschool, kindergarten, first graders in little indoctrination camps that we call schools, where they can't go anywhere. They're required by law to be there, and their parents are not present. These children are being selectively and intentionally targeted by this militarized group and this agenda dead set on indoctrinating them into radical left-wing progressivism. Gaining access and isolating the victim. Abusers will attempt to physically or emotionally separate the victim from those protecting them and often seek out positions in which they have contact with minors. Golly gee, that sounds an awful lot like a school, doesn't it? Parents aren't there. You're seeking out a position like a teacher or a faculty member in which you have regular contact with minors. And you have separated them from those protecting them, i.e. their parents. Trust development and keeping secrets. Abusers attempt to gain trust of a potential victim through gifts, attention, sharing secrets, and other means to make them feel that they have a caring relationship and to train them to keep the relationship a secret. Kind of like telling a kid, hey, look, if you don't want to share your gender identity with your family, if that's not something you're ready to do, if your parents don't support you, don't worry. I've got you. I'll take care of you. You can tell me. You can tell me your pronouns. You can tell me your gender identity. Why don't you walk yourself over here into this closet and change your clothes that your parents sent you out the door in? And why don't you just change into something that fits your identity a little bit better? And we'll go with that in school. And then before you get back on the bus, you go back into your little closet and you can change back so your parents never know. But we've got you. We've got you. Desensitization to touch and discussion of sexual topics. Here's where you see this agenda exposing itself, no pun intended, exactly for what it is. The content, the imagery, the books, the materials that are being used to indoctrinate children, particularly in many public schools, desensitizes children as young as 4 and 5 years old to the discussion of sexual topics. Some do it more slowly. I'm about to show you some examples of schools that are flat out showing kindergartners explicit imagery of genitalia to help them understand the difference between biological sex and gender identity. That desensitizes a child to the discussion of sexual topics and normalizes this. Attempt by abusers to make their behavior seem natural. If you look at all of these tactics that are employed by groomers, which again, we're not allowed to call them, but if you look at all of these tactics, that is exactly what the left is doing to children. It is isolating them from their parents. It is attempting to form a secret bond with them so that the child trusts them more than it trusts the parents. Desensitizing them to graphic imagery and material. And making all of this seem like this is natural, this is good. It's your parents that are wrong. It's your parents that are discriminatory. It's your parents that are repressive. This is normal. We should be able to talk with you about this at 5 years old. This is exactly what they're doing. Here are some examples. So if you've noticed, this isn't just drag queen story hour. Believe it or not, drag queen story hour, where a drag queen comes to a public library and plunks it down and reads a book to small children, that's kind of where some of this stuff started. And when all of that started happening, we were absolutely in shock. There was outrage among conservatives and otherwise decent human beings that thought that it was wildly inappropriate for a man in drag, oftentimes dressed very scantily and inappropriately, to come into a taxpayer-funded building of all places, any place to be honest, but particularly a tax-funded building, and sit down and read to and form relationships with small children, small, impressionable children that have no idea what they're being exposed to and who were dragged there by what I'm assuming is their parents who have lost their dang minds. That was considered wild at the time. That's actually fairly tame compared to where we've now gone. It was a hop, skip, and a jump to this. Here's a bar in North Carolina. They put on a performance of a drag show called Kinky Boots, where kids were encouraged to dress up and perform with adult drag queens. Here is a photo of 3 little boys dressed partially in drag so that they could dance with adult drag queens. Now we're not reading storybooks to children. We're inviting them to come up and be part of the performance. Here's a drag queen in Palm Springs, dressed in a thong and encouraging a child to dance for money, telling them, look at all that money you just made. Check this out.
Look at all that money you just made. Look at all that. My goodness.
Here's another drag queen in Nebraska pulling a kid on stage to dance for the adults in the room who clapped and cheered and gave him money. This has gone beyond reading them books. As bad as that was, as bizarre as that was, as wrong as that was and still is, now we are actually hauling small children up on stages and having them dance next to men in thongs while grown adults throw money at them. I don't know how you get, first of all, I don't know how you get more perverse and disgusting than this, and I'm sure they're going to find a way to top it, because they always do. But if you were an adult in the room, let's set the drag queen aside for a second, because they're their own version of messed up. They've got their own issues, and that needs to be dealt with in an entirely separate arena here. If you're an everyday average adult who's sitting in that room and you're tossing dollar bills at like a 7-year-old who's gyrating on a stage, what? I don't know. The idea that we can't call these people groomers, again, I think that it is polite to call you a groomer if that describes you. I don't want to know what sick freak fantasy is in your head that you actually think that this is not only a good thing, but that you're going to participate in this and throw money at a dancing child. Honestly, I don't want to know what's happening in the recesses of your brain. What kind of a wacko thinks that that's okay? And we're teaching children how to do this. We're not only inviting them up on stage, we're not only, normalizing this, we're now teaching them, and I say we because this is happening with our tax dollars. Okay, this is happening today with our tax dollars. The Tompkins County Public Library, for example, in Ithaca, New York, advertised a 4-week class for 6th through 12th graders, teaching them how to perform in drag, including tutorials on costuming, makeup, lip syncing, and stage presence. A public library funded by public tax dollars is teaching children as young as about 11 or 12 how to dress in drag and dance for grown adults. Happening right now. It's happening in schools. This grooming behavior, regularly happening in schools. And the thing is that faculty members and teachers are not ashamed to admit it. It is all over the internet. It's all over Twitter. It's all over Facebook. It's particularly on TikTok, which is the single most utilized social media website to date by today's youth. This is the website that they're on. And teachers are all over it, telling children, trust me. Don't trust your mom. Don't trust your dad. I got you. Here's one teacher saying that she asks all of her elementary school students for their pronouns, and then she asks whether it's okay if she uses those pronouns in front of their parents, saying that sometimes a child is on their own personal journey and has not yet come out to their parents and may not be comfortable using their preferred pronouns in front of their own mom and dad.
Happy Pride Month, friends. I've always considered myself to be an inclusive educator, but it's only been in the past few years that I put my words into actions. So at the start of a semester, I ask my students for their pronouns, a reminder that they are not preferred, but they are the pronouns that we should be addressing them by. And I also ask them to tell me if I can use their pronouns in front of the class, in front of other teachers, and when I call home, because everyone is in a different part of their journey, and we need to be able to respect that.
Here's another who says that he hands out comment cards at the beginning of every school year, asking children for their pronouns and then asking whether their parents know about it.
Something really inspiring and also a little bit concerning I'm hearing a lot of teachers talk about is asking students their pronouns. This tells me that these teachers really care about their trans and non-binary students and want to make them feel comfortable in class. Unfortunately, asking about pronouns can make trans and non-binary students more uncomfortable because they're forced into a situation where they either need to lie or are forced to come out when they're not ready to. That's why this year I created these survey cards that ask students their pronouns, if they're comfortable with me using those pronouns in front of their peers, and definitely if they're comfortable with me using those pronouns with their parents and families. This strategy was inspired by a tweet by Ellie Ehrlich that circulated on social media. My cards also ask students the name they want to be called in class, as well as their most trusted adult in the building. As a bonus, these first few days of class, I can use them as cold call cards. Comment with your strategy for asking about pronouns and DM me if you want me to send you my template.
So you see an explicit effort by teachers that fall into this LGBTQ agenda propaganda camp. You see an explicit effort to divide children from their parents and to essentially become that kid's parent at school and possibly even outside of school as a mentor. You can't trust your parents, but you can trust me. In Portland public schools, not only do they allow children to choose their own identity, gender identity, and keep it a secret from their parents, they're also teaching children as young as 5 the difference between biological sex and gender identity, and saying that doctors sometimes screw up when they assign a child a gender at birth. In order to do that, these children as young as 5 are being shown graphic imagery of genitalia to explain the difference between sex and gender identity before being told that girls can have penises and boys can have vaginas. I'm going to show you this image, and by the way, just fair warning from here on out, you're going to see and hear some things as I go through some of these examples, and they are incredibly offensive, just to let you know. And here's why I do not want you to stop this video right now. I get that it's uncomfortable. I get none of us want to see this. None of us want to hear this. This is so wildly offensive to us, and I understand that. But here's why it is important that you endure this, because our children are having to. Kids in this country are being force-fed this stuff in schools. And it is our job to understand that to better protect them. Because if we turn a blind eye, if we say, I don't want to hear that, that's so gross and I'm so over that, your kids don't have that option to just tune it out or turn it off or say, I don't want to watch this video. This is what they're being shown at ages so young, they don't even realize what it is that's being pushed on them. But here is what they're being shown. Here's the image that kindergartners in Portland public schools are shown to explain the difference between gender identity and biological sex. 5-year-olds. Now, if you want to tell me that this might be somewhat appropriate for an 11th grader in an anatomy class, fine. But we're talking about 5-year-olds. And then they're told that boys can have the girl parts and girls can have the boy parts because that's just really an assigned gender and you can sort of pick and choose. This is a choose-your-own-adventure game. Believe it or not, it gets worse. Have you heard about this book? This book is called Fun Home, a family tragicomic. It's by a cartoonist whose name is Alison Bechdel. It includes graphic comic book images of women performing oral sex on one another, masturbating, and looking at exposed male genitalia. It's a coming-of-age story about a woman who eventually discovers that she is a lesbian, also delves into the story of her father's own sexuality. It's a book that is available in many public elementary schools. Believe it or not, it's an award-winning book. And now it's been put in public schools, including elementary schools, and has actually had to be removed by some school boards that have been brave enough to do it. It's reportedly now available in many Oklahoma public schools, including Tulsa public schools, Putnam City public schools, and more public schools. It was included in the 12th grade English literature curriculum at Watchung Hills Regional High School in Warren, New Jersey. That was back in 2018, so this has actually been around for a little while. That's not just putting it in a library that way, by the way. That's putting it in the curriculum. This is encouraged, if not required, reading in some public schools. After this book was taken off the school library shelves in Wentzville, Missouri, that move by the school board apparently got pushed back, even by some parents. And this professor, who actually said that young children should be exposed to this kind of graphic imagery at an early developmental age. Here's a local report.
Comic scholar Rebecca Wanzo teaches women, gender, and sexuality studies at Washington University, nominating Bechdel to receive a medal for her work this fall. She says she understands the book is for the college-bound, but is rallying for the right to choose.
Eliminating huge swaths of information for kids about the history of discrimination or about identity that really are things that they need to be thinking about at this developmental age.
And as an educator, choosing the text.
To dictate to teachers what they should be teaching, it seems very disrespectful of teachers.
Apparently, nobody cares that it's very disrespectful of parents to take their children, throw them into an indoctrination camp, and teach them all about sexuality with graphic imagery. Nobody cares about being disrespectful to parents, but don't you dare disrespect a teacher that thinks that it's perfectly appropriate to show elementary school students this. This is what is in this book that is available in some school libraries in elementary schools. That's porn. That's not an anatomy lesson. That's not subjective or suggestive. That's not borderline. That's porn. That is straight up porn. And it's being shown to children, and we are being told by professors in ivory towers, in academies and universities and institutions of higher education, where we are supposed to send our children to the tune of tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, so that they can earn a piece of paper and make their way in the world. We are being told by these people that not only is this okay, not only is this appropriate, but that it is integral to the education of small children at an early developmental age so that they can understand the topic of discrimination and sexuality, and that telling a teacher, you can't show this to my kid, is offensive to the teacher. That's what we're being told. If you show kids porn, if you take them to drag shows where men in thongs are gyrating and spreading their legs, if you're inviting these kids up onto stages to dance for money, you're not even a groomer at that point. You may just be a straight up pedophile and a child abuser. And as far as I'm concerned, you should be arrested and charged with a crime. The dude sharing the Facebook meme that calls all this crap out for the fascist, speech-killing, bullcrap propaganda that it is, he's not the one that should be standing in his driveway in handcuffs. The people that perpetuate this war against children and innocence, should be charged with a crime, everyone. You are normalizing sex for children who are too young to know what's being pushed on them. And you're starting at an early enough age that you know you're getting them before they really understand, so that you can begin forming their building blocks for these topics. If you get them before they even know what's being shown to them, you start weaving their perception of these topics from their very foundation. You're exposing them to, and over time desensitizing them to, highly sexualized adult materials. And you're wiring their little brains to be abused later on by someone else, if not by you. You're teaching them that their parents are the enemy and that it's okay to keep secrets from their parents with other adults. You're teaching them that highly sexualized material is not only normal, but encouraged. You're showing them images of the most deviant behavior and teaching them this is healthy for you. And if you don't think that this is being utilized by actual pedophiles who truly do want to have actual sexual relationships with children, you would be wrong. Here is a far left LGBTQ activist and apparently a public school employee in Michigan who was recently arrested for allegedly trying to have sex with a child. Now, I get a lot of pushback sometimes in these videos for saying the word allegedly. In this country, you are innocent until proven guilty. It is allegedly until you have been convicted. But here's what this guy was caught doing. The Isabella County Sheriff's Office arrested 41-year-old Eric Roman as one of 3 people arrested in a sting operation after police say that they tried to solicit minors online for sex. According to local reports, Roman, 27-year-old Joel Middleton, and 59-year-old Jeffrey Davis were all busted in separate incidents when they showed up to meet the child that they'd met online, only to find out that the kid was actually an undercover agent posing as a young teen. Now, when it comes to Roman, we know, thanks to social media, that this was not his only inappropriate relationship with kids. Here's what he had been doing. There was a recent school board meeting at which Roman spoke for the Mount Pleasant Public School District. He was wearing a Black Lives Matter t-shirt, and he described himself as a resident, townie, taxpayer, vaccinated, and functioning graduate of this high school class of 1999, proud member of the LGBTQIA community, and a proud employee of Mount Pleasant Public Schools. And then he mocked parents who have a problem with their children being indoctrinated with militant LGBTQ propaganda. Check out what he had to say.
I really cannot speak any more eloquently than the people who have spoken before me tonight. But what I can say is that for the last 5 years, I have had the profound privilege of working with your students, with your students, with your students. And I can tell you this, they are hungry for knowledge. They are so hungry for knowledge that despite your words, your wishes, your values, they will learn on their own. So many of your children are hurting, questioning, struggling in this world that we have created. They are simultaneously being taught to celebrate and to hate who they are. I can't deny that. Every day. Ultimately, they will become who they will become with or without us. Give them the chance, the grace, and the support to embrace their own learning. They're going to do it anyway. No matter what you say or do, no matter how many candles you light, no matter how many rallies you hold. With liberty and justice for all.
So it's this gentleman's position that we should be teaching children, young children, all about sexual topics because they're going to learn it anyway. They're going to learn it anyway. So it might as well come from us, and it might as well come from faculty members. And oh, by the way, in case you forgot, I work with your children every day, and there's not a cotton-picking thing that you can do about it. Is it a shock to anyone that this dude was just arrested for trying to hook up with a child for sex? Does this shock anybody? This is what this leads to. I'm not saying that every single person, every single teacher that asks a kid for their pronouns is an intentional, deviant sexual predator that is looking for a sexual relationship with a child. That's not the point. The point is that A, yes, these people do exist within this system. This Roman guy is a perfect example of how this is being exploited and utilized by perverts for their own sick personal agenda. But beyond that, this is a system that is actively grooming small children to believe that these conversations with other adults are normal, that this material is normal, and these photos are normal, and these stories are normal, that this is normal. In this, if at this point, if you don't believe that this is about getting to your children, they've moved on from trying to convince adults. This is no longer about trying to convince adults. That ship has sailed. They understand that there are many of us that are never going to get on board with this LGBTQIALMNOP, pride fest, kink-filled bondage garbage. They're trying to get to your kids. And social media, and apparently the British police, are complicit in protecting this perverted community from targeting children by saying that we can't call them groomers. Okay, I won't call you a groomer. You're a pervert and a pedophile and a freak. How's that for a change? And with that, that's the Brittany Hughes Show. I hope to see you back here next Thursday. Make sure that you go online and check out full episodes of the Brittany Hughes Show on Facebook, Instagram, Rumble, and YouTube. You also need to head over to iTunes, hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. You can find the podcast on Apple Music, Google Music, Spotify, pretty much anywhere you get your podcasts. I will see you back here next week. God bless.